All right, and welcome to The Good Stuff. This is the big episode 57. With us today we have a guest, Mark from Maple. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Mark. I work on a product called Maple, which is a private AI solution similar to ChatGPT, Claude, all the great AIs that you use out there, but we do it end-to-end encrypted so that your data stays just between you and the AI that you're chatting with.
I like the way that you said it's similar to ChatGPT straight after you used the word private, and I just sort of caught myself laughing at the camera. I was like, there could be nothing further from the truth in some ways, but I guess from a UX point of view, it's similar.
Right. That's the goal. Really easy to use, but also super private.
Nice. So why is it so important to be private? Like, what's the...
Yeah, I mean, that's the age-old question of the internet is if you're not doing anything criminal, what are you trying to hide? Why do you need privacy? But there are things that we do every day in our life that we keep private from other people for all sorts of reasons. And there are, as we move digital, there are all sorts of systems that are trying to gather up our data and aggregate it and use it for purposes against us. And it could be simple things like selling our data to advertisers so that we get bombarded with advertisements. And then you go to the other end of the spectrum where you are being surveilled by governments or by non-government entities to potentially snatch you up if you run afoul of something that they don't like.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously you come from a country that tends to be a little bit more interested in privacy and sovereignty and different things, traditionally anyway.
So they say.
Does anybody care in America? Like, I feel like this is a niche market in Australia. Like, I don't know what it's like over there.
Yeah, it feels like nobody cares, especially 5-10 years ago. It didn't seem like anybody cared at all. But with AI, it seems like we finally found that line in the sand where people were okay putting their email out there, and like having Google show them ads in their email meant that all of their communications are being read and sent to the government. They didn't really care about that, but now that they're like actually getting very personal with their thoughts inside of ChatGPT, I feel like I run into just random people when I'm talking about what I do. They will be like, oh yeah, I'll be in ChatGPT and I'll be like typing something and I'm like, I don't really like that I'm saying this right now, or I don't like that you know that about me. So I feel like maybe people are starting to care a little more about privacy finally.
That's interesting.
Do you think how do you win that game though against like the big, it depends who your customer is. Maybe that's the first question, is like, who is your ideal customer for Maple, and then like how do you, like, what is the entry point for that customer? Is it you leading with privacy, or is it you just have to win on product at the end of the day? Like that's the thing that matters the most to most people.
Yeah, it really is. You have to win on user experience. We're going after the consumers, so that's our ideal customer, is just everyday people who want to use these powerful AI tools. That could be a mom who's staying home with her kids and her kid has a weird rash on their skin, right? And she doesn't feel comfortable taking a picture and sending it to Sam Altman, right? Like, look at my kid's skin. Tell me what's wrong with it. So there's that side, right? So they want something more private. But then also the person who's maybe at work and they're worried that they're about to get laid off because AI is coming for their job. And so they want to use AI for themselves. And they necessarily, they just don't want to give away all their data to ChatGPT, or they're worried about maybe their boss is like, knows that they're using it. There could be all sorts of reasons. So we really want to build tools for just the everyday consumer. We could go after like the enterprise market. A lot of VCs come to us and say, why are you building it for users? Build it for like healthcare, or build it for the finance industry or lawyers. And we feel like there's plenty of people doing that. We really just want to go after the everyday user because they get left behind. If there's nobody building for consumers, they get left behind. And so we just, it's no secret. I come from Apple. I spent 6 years at Apple. I come from a lot of other startups prior to that, really focusing on mobile app development and user experiences. And I'm trying to bring all of that knowledge into this space now that I'm working on, and say it's got to be as good from a user experience perspective as ChatGPT. but it has the privacy. So that way, when users sit down and they compare the two, it's basically checkboxes all the way down, and then there's a big red X on privacy, and ours has a green check. And so they're like, well, if they're the same, I'll go with the one that's not going to sell me down the river, sell me up the river, whatever that phrase is.
I'm pretty sure it's down the river, but I mean, focusing on the consumer and privacy was a fairly successful strategy for Apple when they used to do that. Like, it seemed to work. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I mean, linking it back to product then, like, how do you? I mean, it must be hard as well because, you know, obviously, like OpenAI, Anthropic, they have like massive budgets. You know, they can literally like go and build in any direction they really want to. So I guess, like, how do you guys figure out, like, from a product perspective, like, where's the wedge? Like, where do you guys go and focus to win on a product for a consumer that also, you know, treats ChatGPT as a bit of a verb and maybe isn't really, you know, living in the same space as a lot of us. We find there's like a big technical like gap in understanding. Like, most people are still using ChatGPT for like prompt and response type chat. They're not really, you know, playing with any of these models in much deeper ways. So, like, how do you guys focus on like identifying that way in for a consumer on product?
That's definitely a big challenge where they have $1 million budgets, whereas we have hardly anything because it's just two of us working off of a shoestring budget. So we're trying to raise money so that we have a little more firepower. But the advantage we have, like you just said, a lot of people are still using the older models or using kind of just the old way of doing things because they're just now coming to the game of AI. And so we're able to benefit from these large budgets at both Anthropic and OpenAI, where they do all the research in the UX. We find the UX that's the best, and we don't have to like play games and explore like they do. So we'll replicate kind of the tried and true portions that users really love, and we'll build those into ours and just focus our efforts there. And then we also feel like we have the ability to kind of dig into places that users don't want to go with ChatGPT. So we just announced our rebrand last week, and we're really trying to pitch ourselves as the AI for real life. This is the AI that you feel comfortable talking to about everything. And so if you ever hesitate or you cringe as you're talking to ChatGPT, remember that feeling, remember what you were talking about or what you stopped talking about, and come do that in Maple instead and see how you feel. And we think that might be a unique value prop that we can offer rather than just replicating UX with privacy. It's also, hey, there's an unlock here where there's stuff you can actually do in here that you would not be willing to do elsewhere.
I mean, I had an experience the other day where I've got a young daughter, and one of the babysitters had like an AI that she was talking to as a friend, and she asked like, "Oh, Dad, can I talk to like the AI as a friend? You know, like Mum talks to Claude for work, and you've got Wingman." And I was like, "No, no, you can't. You're too young right now. But when the time comes, then." I was like, all right, I already have a Maple proxy. I already have like integrated with Wingman. So I will give you your own curated environment that I know I can see into, but nobody else can see into. And then we will check what's going on.
I'm curious about what you think about that. Both like are you concerned about the data side where they're capturing her data? Or are you concerned about her and her brain development with the AI, you know?
Both.
Coming to her,
but it's kind of both, right? Like there's an element where I look at like how I've interacted with AI over the last sort of 3 years, and I don't know if I'd say it's been nothing but good stuff. Like but it's definitely been a positive for me. Like, I'm able to do a lot more. It gives me a lot more agency. I've learned tons, and I use AI with the kids to like build things. So they've both got games that they build. They'll use it for like school projects. They don't tend to do presentations anymore. They'll just do like full-blown interactive websites with games in them and stuff. It's like it hits hard for them. So I like that aspect of using it as a tool. I think putting it in that mode of counselor, it worries me a little bit, like what they would get back. Because even in, say in Maple, right, like the privacy thing might be solved, but if they're talking to Kimmy K 2.6 or like a DeepSeek model, I'm a bit like, there is still a bit of, deep-seated Chinese influence on these models that I don't know if I want this advising my 8-year-old daughter about what to do.
Yeah, for sure. You can have Anthropic advising your daughter, or you can have the CCP advising your daughter, right? Like, which one do you? or you can have Mistral, so you can have like the French, going to town on her brain. Pick your poison.
I mean, I did do an experiment ages ago where taking like a DeepSeek, running locally on the machine, and just via the system prompt, like trying to get it to read back to me various things about Tiananmen Square. You could kind of fool it into admitting certain things happened, but as soon as you asked it for an opinion on the government, you could see like the streaming of the thinking. It would be like bang, 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 yeah, this happened, this, and I had like the whole like amnesty write-up of the thing like in the system prompt, so it had all the data there, fresh, and it would still get so far down the thinking, and then just go poof, like all disappears, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know, like this is all running locally on my machine. You're like, oh wow, there's a real bias in a lot of these things. When you come to like that, anything where the bias really matters. I mean, I have this like really, I don't know, I mainly use these things for building open source projects, if you know what I mean. So it's a kind of like, it works or it doesn't work. I don't mind too much about what data's out there because it's all going to be released anyway. I would like more sort of open source code just out there for these models to train on that has like a sort of Bitcoin Nostr based influence. I think that's probably better if it sees that. But so I don't think about it a lot, but like in those moments I think it's tough to figure out what do you want in that model.
It's really interesting as well. Like I feel like a lot of the conversation around some of these like privacy concerns as well tend to be they tend to like channel those really big examples like the Tiananmen Square like type inquiry. It's like, what can I not find out, or what would they not tell me about the government? And I almost feel like maybe the bigger risk is like how do these things shape your own perception, your own like ability to think, what you think about over time. It's like a smaller compounding effect that it just has like with more kind of like seamless regularity over like 6 months or a year or 5 years. And we don't really know how that's going to play out because we haven't had the sample space yet. But that, I guess, is the kind of thing. And then it's like model agnostic at that point, right? It's like they can all like influence how you think and what you think about and how you perceive the world and your worldview and your politics. And, like, it's potentially endless at that point.
Yeah, and it's learning and measuring too. So as you talk to it, Andy, if it says something that's false to you and you take it as truth and then you move on with the conversation, it's like, okay, Andy believed this thing that I said that was wrong, right? And so it starts keeping track of that, and it can pass more lies off to you in the future. So if it's ever given a directive, right? Like if some large advertiser comes to ChatGPT and says, we have this new vaccine, or I shouldn't say that word, sorry. We have this new magical wonder drug coming out, right? This new wonder drug coming out soon. We need everybody to be on board with it within the next year. So make it happen. Yeah. And you can deploy it on this system, right? Whereas like, if you want to do that on television or through YouTube ads or something, like you make an ad that's going to hit maybe 20% of the populace. And you're like, okay, I'll make another ad that's going to hit another 20%. And it's very inefficient. But with AI, it's like, hey, deploy this and do it in a way that like 99% of the people will believe it, and it'll deploy to all three of us on this podcast here. It'll be a different version of it, and it'll be like really subtle over time and slowly convince us of something. It's kind of crazy the power that it can have.
I mean, that's the George Costanza effect, right? It's like, it's not a lie if you believe it. That's the if it makes you believe it, then at that point, like, yeah, what game are we playing?
That is kind of nuts, though. It's not a front of mind concern I have a lot of the time working with these things. As I say, like my general interaction is more in forcing them to do stuff. Sorry, Rocco and your Basilisk. Like, I mean, working with you to do stuff, not forcing. Like, I would never force. Whereas I don't really go to them for facts necessarily or opinions and stuff like that. But is that something that you think you're gonna? Like, how are you trying to deal with that? Because if you're going down this personal AI route, I guess there's going to be a lot more people engaging with it in that kind of quasi-social way, or just seeking information from it. Like, can you even deal with it? Like, how?
I think it's certain layers. The first layer is the base is the model. So like, how was the model trained? What data did they put into it? What kind of weights and biases they put into it? So that's that whole layer we need to get more visibility into. And then you have the middleware layer of like deploying the model and serving it up to the users. ChatGPT, Anthropic, other systems are closed. So we actually don't know. We don't know what the system prompt is, right? We can try and crack it and break it, but there's still stuff on their servers we'll never get to.
Anthropic will release it every couple of months by accident.
Because
their models are so good that they will leak all their stuff like every few months.
It's true. Yeah. Oh my goodness, what a nightmare. Yeah, so I mean, there's all places that they can just put directives that we won't know about, and so I think really we need open source AI. We need open source harnesses. We need open source models. We need open data sets going into these models. We just need visibility into the whole process, and then we can see, oh, this guy over here is like earmarking, like 75% of their profits to this big advertiser over here. So I know that I'm being influenced here. I think we need more visibility up and down the stack. That's the best way to solve it.
It's kind of interesting, right, that you wouldn't, like in the Bitcoin space, there's this whole ethos that you really just wouldn't trust a closed source wallet. I mean, crypto people would because, they're not really doing it. but Bitcoiners really wouldn't. And you would say, like, it feels like there should be a similar ethos that develops inside the AI space, where it's like, look, if you're going to take part of your own goddamn brain and put it over there into a machine, do you not want to see what's going on? Like, why would you trust anybody to have that level of control over you? It's kind of nuts. But
yeah. Well, and especially as we're in this sorry, real quick, as we're in this mode of just I put a prompt, you give a response, I read it, and I call BS, and then I read another response, right? It feels like we can be in more control there, even though there is a lot of hidden stuff going on. When you advance to agents and you just start letting them go and say like, process this data and then send stuff out on my behalf and like write to the internet on my behalf, that's when we really turn over a lot of control and power and really need more visibility into things. So it gets crazy there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask as well, like how would it, like, it's hypothetical, but like, how would this work with Maple, right? Let's say I'm instructing the agent to help me become more disciplined, or I don't know, more pious, more religious, or more, I don't know, politically moderate or something like. Pick your example, right? But I'm essentially asking it to manipulate me. I'm asking it to help me shape my own behavior. I'm asking it to help like guide me through to become something else. Like, how would that work in Maple? Like at that point, it's not maybe mediated by Anthropic and OpenAI. It's being mediated by the user. Like, how do you mitigate like when it's like intentional by design from like a user's intent versus intentional by design by a big evil corporation?
Well, right now, Maple is effectively just put in the hands of the user. So if you want it to be a coach, right, and be your religious coach and help you find more spirituality in life, then you simply just tell it, hey, this is what I want you to do. Now go do it. And then you have conversations with it. We make all of our code open source. And so you can see the system prompts that we have in there, and they're very minimal. It's simply just system prompts that say, hey, you're Maple, you're not Anthropic. Because we use the open source models, and they oftentimes think that they're Anthropic Claude, which makes you realize where they got all their data from, and all these Chinese models. But yeah, it's really we try to stay out of the way, and we try to be a thin layer between you and these powerful open source models that are running on large GPUs that nobody can afford. Like the three of us can't afford to have 8 NVIDIA B200s chained together in our office here running these massive models. Maybe you can, I can't. So that's what we try to do. And then, we just let the user be the guide. And I feel like that's a lot different than having Anthropic secretly trying to make you more politically aligned one way or another based on what they think is the correct interpretation for AI and how everybody should be using it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some inbuilt bias in these models that it gets exaggerated over time. But I do think the more worrying piece is around the harness and like what actually gets done on your behalf. So in like, say, Claude Code, I remember, is it Mario that built Pi? Talk about the reason he built the Pi coding agent was that he realized that, Claude Code was changing the system prompts that they were sending along with his code requests, like on the daily, like every day it had a brand new system prompt that was going in there, and he couldn't have any sort of consistency in how he was building workflows on top of these things. He said, right, I'm going to get rid of all of that. I'm going to make it really visible around what's going in and what's coming out. And then, hey, presto, you seem to get a slightly better result. But, one of my big predictions for this year was that models are going to start mattering less, and the tooling around the model is going to start mattering a lot more. So I think this has been going for a while, where we believe that models are getting so much smarter, but usually it's that we're just running like a lot more calls in a more automated and structured way through these like agents. So even like ChatGPT and Claude, like on the web, are still using that kind of agent loop to solve your question. So you ask a question and it goes, oh, what's Pete really asking here? And then I'm going to inject this and that and the rest of the stuff. So I think if you can take that like agent harness layer out and have that open source, that solves a lot of these problems beyond like the deep-seated bias. But I mean, so I would think for like the Maple agent, like how have you approached that? Have you written your own harness? Have you picked up something else that's available that's open source and then like wrapped that? Like what's the approach?
We're going completely vanilla with our own agent harness. We looked at OpenClaw, we looked at Hermes and all these other projects that are out there, and decided well, my co-founder especially, he's the one that's like architecting the whole thing, and really just felt like they would not be the good starting point. Let's just build it ourselves, build it really lean, and build it with privacy from the foundation. So that's what we're going at. And the main focus is memory. The current Maple, which we now call Maple Research, it's simply just context within each chat thread. So every chat is its own island, just like similar to how ChatGPT was when it first launched. And which is great. There's a lot of times where you want everything segregated and you just want to chat and only have the context stay within there. Now the agent is going to be different, where everything you say to it is going to be cataloged and stuck into long-term memory into a database. And so as you talk to it, it's going to be able to recall anything that it needs to. And it's all going to be open source. People will be able to see this is exactly what's going on. This is how it's cataloging things. And so there's not going to be like any hidden agendas here. We're going to put it all out there. And hey, if we decide to bias it, if we get opinionated in there, you'll see it in the code, and you can decide this is bull. I don't like this, or I do like this. I'm happy that they're making this decision.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So currently I've got like on my Wingman setup at home, I've got like an open code agent that then talks via like the Maple proxy, and that's how I would do that. But in this new system then, could I just install like the Maple agent CLI and then just let that go? Do I need the proxy as well, or do you handle all that via the agent?
Eventually, first the agent is going after, you might not be the target market for the agent. I'll just say that. Okay. The target market is the person who doesn't, you're too technical. You want more than what we're going to do. We're going after just the everyday person who has their phone and they want the power of AI that gets to know them over time. And so they download an app and they text with it, and that's the main focus. Eventually, though, yes, we're going to expand the research app to be a full-blown CLI that can create documents and can code and build things. That's like part 2, and that'll be our second agent, is the builder agent.
Yeah. So I think we've got some good overlap. I mean, we've talked about this before, right? Of like where we're focused on the sort of small, medium enterprise space. We care about all the same things around privacy and control, and like I feel like there's this real risk at the moment where people are going to start defining their entire business as a set of workflows inside Claude Cowork, and then you get to a point where you don't really have a business anymore. You just have Claude Cowork, and you're like it's like you're a commission salesman for Claude Cowork now. Like you don't have any control. They can turn you off whenever they want. And I kind of want to offer an alternative where people can put that into this other space, which is what we do with Wingman, and then that allows us to run any of the agents that we need to underneath it. But we kind of go like one level above the harness. Like I feel like there's so much competition inside the harness space, and just getting work done in general, or coding agents. I was like, I don't know if I can compete there and still hit this goal, so I'll let everybody else fight it out for best agent harnesses, and I'll just take them all.
Yeah.
and then put them into this broader context. So I'll be very keen when you come around to having like the CLI out there, getting that into Wingman and testing it. So, I mean, I generally a lot of my coding will go through like a Codex, Claude Code, or Pi with one of those sort of bigger models on the back end. And then I would generally reserve Maple for those. If there's like just stuff I want to ask, like that's either I'm dealing with data that just can't get leaked and I just need to like process it or anonymize it into a different format. Like it's been fantastic for that. But yeah, or it's just comments that I just don't need out there in Sam's notebook. It's like if I wouldn't write this in Dario's the back of Dario's moleskin, like am I gonna really just type it into his browser? But
right. As you work with small businesses in your area, how concerned are they about privacy? Do they care at all?
A lot of them just don't think about it at all. Some of us do care, and they don't care originally. Like there's what we've seen in a couple of places is that they'll start away, they go away, they do stuff with Claude Code, and they get a bit hooked on the power angle of this thing, where they're like, oh my god, I could just turn this agent into an employee. Like that next employee could be an agent. Like fantastic. I can grow with this thing. And then it depends on the business. Some of them will then just scare the shit out of themselves at that point by having that realization that they go, oh shit, I'm giving up control to this other business. And it's helpful that every 6 months, like, you know, Claude just turns Claude Code into a retard and it can't do anything for like a month. And so like they'll go, oh, well, hang on a minute, I can't rely on this thing. I need to be able to do it. I need to be able to move that workload somewhere else. I need to be somewhat agnostic of whatever the agent is that actually does the work, but the work needs to be transferable. So like the way I wrap all these agents inside Wingman is I don't use any of their internal like hooks and skills libraries and various everything like that. I've got like a layer above that defines all of that work. So you can just swap out, like you could go from Maple to Codex to Claude Code to Pi, and everything would still work broadly the same. You get some different outputs and how good they are at, you know, outputting the correct JSON is usually the issue, right? Stuff like this. But
so you've built it to have like a consistent personality across all of these. You've been able to abstract away some of the model variability.
I based it on myself, so it's got no personality at all. It just doesn't.
I don't believe that.
It's in all honesty, so each person can define their own sort of. I have like a base agent, which is the one that I'll talk to say, all right, what's on the task board, like what's getting done, where are we at with this, and the rest of the stuff. It then delegates work off to like all the coding agents or research agents, which just operate in their own context. They basically have it's like, you need to do this job now. Like they just communicate with each other in blobs of JSON, and like it's not even worth looking at. And then my home agent has a bit more personality, but it does act a bit differently depending on whether you run it on Claude or anything else. But I feel like the personality bit you can steer with just the agents MD and stuff like that. It seems to, well, unless it's Claude, then you need your Claude MD. But
you know, I might have like a slightly altered take on like whether businesses here actually like I'd maybe reframe it as like do they prioritize privacy, because I think they all care about it, but I also think the prism through which they assess whether they can like actually move forward with like their procurement of a particular piece of software it tends to be more mediated through, can we just trust this company? And like the way they then assess that is, well, because like all of our competitors use this company, right? Like I think this is just an extension of like everyone using Google and Microsoft, and you know, it's just that on steroids now. And so for a lot of these companies, they will just opt for the big name because the big name in their view is trustworthy, whereas it should really be the inverse of that. It's like you shouldn't really be trusting them because they're the big name. But then like I think convenience also tends to win out. It's like, how much more of our budget do we need to allocate to going and figuring this stuff out versus a standard deployment that we've done, you know, in many other businesses that are similar shaped to ours. And I think that tends to tends to win out. But then when, Pete and I are having these conversations with business owners, it's like, oh yeah, we very much care about privacy. So there is this like misalignment a little bit there.
Yeah.
I think
and it comes down to like a cost, right? Where you have to factor in, okay, if this data got leaked somehow, like what's the cost of the business, and is it worth it to put in all this extra cost to solve a problem that maybe is never going to exist? And so that's all part of the equation too.
Yeah, and the bigger companies, like once you get into big enterprise land as well, I'm sure they probably have like their legal teams looking through this procurement process as well, and I'm sure they satisfy themselves that there's like a legal recourse if something goes like really badly. But we don't concern ourselves with enterprise. We're like small and medium-sized companies, and so they don't have that legal recourse, and yet they will still often behave in the same way that the enterprise would, and that they don't have the ability to do that legal review and rely on that pathway. So like they do very much, I think, just blindly trust, and then maybe some of it is also just it's convenient, and then a lot of it is we don't have the budget to explore this stuff any further than we do.
I think it's hard for enterprises to do anything as well. I mean, we talked last week a bit about we're both fans of like 37 signals and how they work, and when you hear those guys talk, there's a lot of saying, well, great, like we don't do that. We do this, and I always think like there's plenty of like multi-billion-dollar companies out there that are happy to provide this service for you in exchange for stealing your business from your kids. And if that's what you want, that's fine. You do that. We'll do the opposite for people that want all the power but want to retain their business. And hopefully, there's several thousand businesses out there that care about that, and there probably are in the world. We just need to figure out how to find them all properly. But it's just I'm just not that interested in working with large enterprises that turn around and say, okay, we've got Copilot, and I'm like, okay, it's done. we don't need to continue this conversation. If you're happy with that, I'm not coming in and getting involved.
Do you know, I think there's also there is a threshold, I think, to some of this stuff. Like there's like a level of risk that people are prepared to accept, and then beyond that, it's like, oh no, hang on, we need to find a different alternative. And I know even for me, right, really pretty early on, I started building this thing called Corpus, which is just basically like a big graph database of all of my health information. So all the diagnostic tests that I've gotten done, and I was trying to navigate through an autoimmune condition that was a bit hard to define. But there was stuff where I was like, do you know what? Screw it. It's convenient. I'm just going to run this this test result through ChatGPT. I'm not going to worry about it because I need this information. I need to be able to piece this together. And then I definitely got to a point where I was like, okay, I did a full DNA panel because I was like, this could be quite handy to try and navigate this stuff and see where the susceptibilities are. And then I was like, okay, no, I'm not putting this through. I'm not running this through ChatGPT or Claude or anything like that. That's where I draw the line. And that comes with limitations, right? Because I'm like, it'd be really useful for me to be able to piece together that information with the rest of the information and get an agent looking through that as well. But I'm just no, I'm going to do that bit manually, and it's less efficient for me. But I feel that's the line in the sand, and I'm sure businesses have similar lines in the sand.
Yeah, it's true. So you just have to find where it is for them, and it's the same thing with security at the airport and stuff, right? Some people are okay with just one more thing added on and one more thing added on, and. So with you were fine chatting with ChatGPT about this, about that, and then finally you're like, wait a minute, I've gone down this path. There's one more piece of information that I want to share. You got to work with them to find that. That old adage of nobody ever got fired by using IBM or upgrade it to Google or whatever, right? Google and Microsoft are in a great spot right now because they already have everybody's data. Everybody already trusts them with all of their files on their OneDrive, SharePoint, whatever they call it now. And it's oh, by the way, we're going to activate AI and we're going to charge you for it. And you're just going to pay us. And then because you already trust us. And what a great business model for them to have. It's definitely an uphill battle for the three of us trying to work with people to get them away from those platforms. And it's how do you convince this business to say, hey, your data is important, we know you already gave it to those other people, but maybe stop giving it to more people, and keep it private for yourself. It's a tough sale.
My gut feel is that you can never tell anybody anything or convince them of this stuff. You've just got to find those slightly nuts people that, like you, think this way already. Like, it's just like, where are these people? Yeah. And there seems to be more and more people that care about this every day. I mean, there's different, like, I feel like the language on, let's say, more the left is like surveillance capitalism type stuff, and then on the more right side of the curve, it's all about, like, you know, government spying and NSA stuff and Snowden leaks and stuff like that. And like, people have different ways that they express it, but I think there is this desire that I would much prefer not to have somebody else influencing me and affecting my decisions than I would. I mean, the big thing for me was just, like, particularly like with OpenAI and Anthropic, both companies will get on the TV and just talk long and hard about how your entire industry is going to disappear. They're going to take your jobs. And that's when they're facing like that way. And then they turn around the other way to their other face. And their second face says, oh, come and use our product. It's really nice for you and really convenient. And then they turn around again and they go, oh, I mean, I'm stealing his job. Like, that guy is just giving me all this stuff. And you're like, I feel like at some point they're going to do the marketing for us. Like, more people will wake up. There just needs to be something there to collect them when they realize, and it needs to be as good. Like, I feel like you get that instant, like, when somebody realizes what the benefit is that they need, or what the outcome is they need, which is they want to retain the control. I think it's more control than privacy in my mind. Like, they come hand in hand, right? Like, you can't have the control unless you know that nobody else has got all of your data. But it's like, if they can turn around and go, oh, what I need I need all of this output, but I need to be able to control it, and I need it to continue running. If this company goes away, I need to be able to, if that company goes down for a week, I need to keep running. So, like, I need redundancy across the thing. And as soon as you start to introduce those things, then you go, okay, well, it's actually safer to be in a system where I haven't defined everything in Anthropic, because now if Anthropic goes out of business, or it goes rogue, or, you know, they just get cyber attacked and everything goes down for a week, I can still do stuff. And, like, same flip side from OpenAI. So there's like an in there where you can just be like the more redundant version. So, oh, you can use OpenAI and Anthropic. Now, neither of them have got complete control over you. And then you say, oh, well, if you don't like talking that there, well, then here's Maple as well. And, like, we bring that in. And now people have got options across all of these things. So I think that's the best way I can think of going after it, is to just, look, it's your business. You've put, like, you talk to people who've put like 20 years into something, and you've built it up from the ground. I said, look, this guy is on the telly saying that your business is dead. Like, you don't just trust him straight out. Like, just retain some control. You don't have to give it all away just because you can. You can just use what they're selling, but not give them complete control. Like, that's the bit, I think, for me. I know where are you at with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what your experience is, the both of you, but this whole thing about replacing jobs with AI, I feel like it's definitely oversold. A lot of people are saying that it's going to replace this industry and that industry, and it already is, maybe, and all these layoffs are happening and being blamed on AI. But day to day, in my view, I don't feel like I'm necessarily replacing a lot of jobs with AI. I'm just doing more as a founder with AI. And so I'm able to withhold or hold off hiring people for a little bit longer, make our money stretch a little bit longer. But I don't think that we've necessarily like fully replaced people yet. I would love for the AI to get better. I would love to have a full marketing person that's just AI that actually is really good. But I have zero confidence right now that I could just turn over my marketing to some AI. I know that it could come up with stuff, but I would still be the one that's like reviewing it, and I would still be prompting it, and I would still be guiding and directing it. And then, like you said, it would wake up totally new a week later and having forgotten everything that it learned before. And so in my experience, like, I don't see us replacing a lot of jobs with AI today. I think we still need humans in the loop directing a lot of this stuff until it gets better than it is now. And I think we're still years away from that.
I mean, I think there's an element of, like, I will probably get more output, like, building software from myself plus agents than I might have expected from, like, a team of 5 engineers. And so, like, I can't imagine hiring a ton of software engineers anymore. Like, even like a team of 5 or 10, you'd be like, and like Justin talked about this when he was on, he was like, the idea of having like 10 engineers and like all of the overhead and communication that goes along with like keeping everybody on track and like aligned around the same goals and like updating each other, like you could just have 2 and they work a lot with agents, and then all of a sudden like that collapses because that grows like as a square, like it's a square, right? Like it just expands the more people you add. So I think in that instance I'm kind of on the view of like, yeah, a lot of jobs are displaced, or like a lot of companies don't need to hire. But I also agree that like, and we've talked about this like with marketing stuff, like, okay, well for this podcast, should we be like AI slop marketing as much stuff as we can to try and build an audience? And like, we can't really do it because it's not really in line with our principles. But also, I really don't think you could do it well at this point, and you have to still be in the loop to oversee a lot of this stuff. So I think what it does do is it makes individuals way more productive and capable of producing output. So I think that's absolutely true, and I don't really see how that can't, on a long enough timescale, just move like the job market around, as it were. Like certainly people are not going to get hired. I think the issue with big companies shedding people is more that big companies have always been full of hundreds of thousands of people doing bullshit jobs where, you know, it's just, you know, your job is every Monday morning this spreadsheet comes in, and then every Friday, like, these emails need to go out and this stuff needs to be uploaded here, and that is, and you just fucking do that. Like, we're just gonna let you do it. And I think a lot of tasks will disappear, but I think there's a lot of jobs that are tasks in very large organizations, and so I think that I could see happening. But even that, it's still hard. I mean, when we sat down, I don't know, maybe like two-ish years ago, and we were saying like, okay, where do we focus? I said, well, I think all the value goes more immediately to like the individual and the SME. Like the individual, because you as a person can just make a decision and do it, and this can be useful to you, and it is obviously useful. This is why ChatGPT and Anthropic became so big so quick, sort of thing. Enterprises, I think it's going to be very hard to change. Like I've done a lot of like very large, like $billion change management projects in the past. Just like, this is not, it's not easy to take an organization that's going that way and even make them go like 5 degrees to the left. Like, so I don't think you're going to have these massive changes overnight where you take 100,000 person business and now all of a sudden it's AI native. Whereas I think if you take a 20 person organization where the person that runs the thing is the guy that's done all the stuff, and again, like that founder, like that SME owner, you know, they've probably mortgaged their house. Like, they're on the hook for 20 other people's mortgages before they even get to feel secure on their own home at night and the rest of it, and they carry all the risk and stuff. And if you can come to that person and say like, all right, what if you didn't have another mouth to feed? What if the 20 mouths that you've got were just like twice as effective? And then all of a sudden he goes from like you know, I make 5% profit to it explodes. Like he doubles his profit overnight and it's all his. And you're like, that person is quite receptive to the idea of like, even if it's not firing people, it's growth. Like, I am resource constrained. Like, you don't meet an SME owner that doesn't have enough people. And like, particularly Australia, I mean, you might not know, but it would probably cost around about $100,000 to hire somebody to just sit in a chair and answer the phone. Like, when you add in all the on costs of like the office space, the payroll taxes, the, you know, government tax, the super, the holidays, everything else, and you're like, okay, well, if your next hire has to be $100,000, you can't hire anybody unless you're going to earn $200,000 on that investment, sort of thing. So it really makes it hard to grow these businesses. And these people have grown in that environment. And then you come along and say, okay, well, you've got these razor thin margins. What if we can just pump the margin up by allowing everybody to do a bit more? And I think that's kind of compelling. So we sell it on this. We have this meme called up, up, down, which is okay. What you need to do as a small business owner is margin up, capital up, risk down. And then this is how we're going to use AI to do it. So the margin up piece is just about pushing that productivity lever for any individual. So if everybody gets a little bit more out, that goes straight into bottom line for the business owner. The capital up, then you start building these tools and these systems and these workflows over time. So that's our like marginal gains approach. Just, you take one workflow, you optimize it, you move on to the next one, you move on to the next one. You get them consistently running, you start to automate a lot more of your business. And then, the risk down is, well, now you've got margin and capital. let's go start taking risk out of the business and seeing where else we can focus. But that's our sort of approach. Would you add anything, Andy?
I would just say, I also think maybe the bit that's missing here is that there's space for a new category. And, as Pete was saying, the one thing that we keep talking about a lot is that we just see a lot of the value flowing back to small and medium-sized businesses. But small and medium-sized businesses, definitionally, they hit a point of diminishing marginal returns where the number of people they have relative to how much further they can grow kind of maxes out, and that's what necessitates them being SMEs. But we're not seeing that so much now with the technology. There's the example from a few weeks ago of the two brothers with the GLP-1 startup that was turning over $1 billion, and they started a year ago or something crazy. And it's that's obviously an outlier, right? But I do think this kind of thing could happen more, where you get some really capable people working in enterprise. And I think the obstacle is tended to be in the past, part prestige and also part risk. It took a lot of capital to go and start a business, and also there's a heap of risk tied up in that. You don't necessarily want it to fail. But I think AI just closes that that gap a lot. You can take a lot of experiments, or you can make a lot of experiments very quickly to find the one that really works in a pretty capital efficient kind of way. But it also doesn't mean that you're destined to remain at $10 million turnover for the rest of your life. 2 to 5 man bands could go out and actually have pretty outsized scale now, but still remain quite lean. And I think that's maybe an emerging category that might nibble away at big enterprise and the umbrella that they have in the market, and you can start to disintermediate those companies a little bit over time. Because as Pete says, they're going to be super slow to do any kind of meaningful change management. So maybe they just cede parts of their business to the new entrants who are people who worked in those businesses. And then you still got the smaller end of town, and they just become pretty lean as well. But you end up just with more of this stuff, I think. There's maybe just a shift in the market. Instead of it just being job loss, it's actually new business creation is the number we should be paying more attention to.
Yeah, and I know a few people who are doing their own self-incubators, their own self-accelerators, where they've given themselves a little bit of runway, and then they're trying out lots of different ideas. And you can effectively, you can build your own launch website, you can build a prototype, you can get a mailing list going, and you can do that for 10 or 20 different products and put them out there, and then see which one starts to get traction, and then jump into that and pour more fuel onto that fire. So I do think we'll see a lot more of that. People starting off on their own or teaming up like you two did, and then try out a bunch of ideas and see which one works. And then the other aspect to it that you guys have both kind of touched on is just automation in general. A lot of the AI conversation, and maybe it's our Western world of thinking, but comes at it from the generative AI of ChatGPT and Claude. But there's the whole other aspect of just automation within different systems. If you have a warehouse and you have systems in the warehouse that need better automation or logistics, you can put AI into those little systems using smaller models, using more machine learning, and really start to bring down your costs and bring up your efficiency in all sorts of different parts of your business. And those are things that aren't necessarily displacing people, but are just really driving driving your bottom line and driving profitability. And a lot of times we don't look at that as AI because we call it more automation, but there's a lot more that can be done there as well.
Yeah, we've been talking about this quite a bit recently, where we almost define it as like little intelligent snacks, whereas it's like a lot of work that you do. Like ideally, you want the work that's being done to be as close to just it's a piece of software that executes deterministically as you can get it, right? And so a lot of tasks where, let's say OpenClaw, right? It impresses everybody because you say, "Can you do this?" And then 10 minutes later, it's done that. And it's like this little parlor trick where you go, "Holy shit, that is amazing. How did you do that from nothing? I can't believe it. This thing's amazing. I'm putting this thing everywhere. Right, I'm firing everybody. We're going to get these OpenClaws in. They're going to do the stuff." And then it's like 2 weeks later and you say, "Oh, OpenClaw, just do that thing again." And he's like, "I have no idea what you're on about. And I've just emailed your wife and told her that it's over." You're like, What's going on? Like, this is kind of nuts. And I feel like a lot of this comes down to this idea that there's different places where you can like define and execute the work. Like it feels like very much like the Claude approach, and maybe a little bit more of open code, is that the work gets defined as a series of like markdown files and skills, and then everything sort of runs like the runtime is the agent loop. And it's all about the agent loop just looping on itself and saying, what's the next best thing? What's the next best thing? What's the next best thing? And driving stuff forward. And because like the agent loop is the area where you get that probabilistic behavior, like that's where these mistakes creep in, because when you write a skills file, what you're saying is, I hope you do this. It's like, I hope you do it in this order. And it goes, yeah, oh, boss, mate, I am doing it in that order. I am absolutely doing it. You make no mistakes, right? I heard you, right? And then it's, I'm sorry, you caught me. I didn't do it in that order.
Like, why did you not do this? I thought that's what you wanted me to do. You're like, no, I put it in the file. This is what I want you to do. Yeah.
Or like there's so much stuff that's in the context now as it runs for a long enough time that it just doesn't understand the conflicting stuff that you supply as a human. And then there's all the entropy that like Claude are putting in there because they're just changing all their system prompts every 5 minutes to A/B test stuff and see what works. And so you get this like all this behavior that's kind of erratic. And then the other end of this is you've just got a piece of software that runs, that does a job, but it can't make any intelligent decisions. So it could do, maybe you can do some like parsing of different things. You say, well, if it's got these words in it, we'll go that direction or we'll go this direction. And that's uninspired. That's like a, like an early 2000s chatbot interface. Like, they could do stuff, but they were shit. Right? And then I think there's this middle ground where we define these inside Wingman as our like pipeline works, where we say, okay, you have a pipeline where something happens and we're going to take several discrete steps. But the important thing is the runtime is code, not agent loop. So the code calls the agent loop, gets a response, and then decides the next thing to do. And like we find that like way better from an automation point of view than just firing an agent loop at this stuff, because the agent loop is magic when it works and then crap when it doesn't. It just falls to pieces. Right, so what we often do is we'll go through, like, automate the stuff, maybe in that agent loop to start with, and then use that session to then define, like, the pipeline that runs for actually repeating this. And then you can run this pipeline over and over again, and we might have, 50 different agent sessions that pop up during this pipeline, and it has curated context for what it needs to do. What's the decision you need to make to move us to the next step, and have piss off, like you're gone. And then we just move forward with just that like useful information. But is this like, when you're building like Maple Agent, like how have you thought about that contrast between like how much do we put in the loop and just hope the agent does the right thing, and like how much like code do we need around that to force it to act in a different way?
Right. So we haven't quite solve that, architect that part yet, because the first iteration of the agent is going to be what we're calling the vault. It's going to be a vault of all your information, and then this personal insights dashboard. So when you go in, you pull up the vault, it'll say, okay, I've been chatting with these guys. I've been chatting with Mark for the last 6 months, And these are the books that everybody's recommended to him.
Did you call your agent Mark?
No, I'm chatting with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. You can name whatever you want to. It's just called Maple. You're chatting with Maple. Yeah. No, actually, I can read all your chats. They all come to me. So say that you're chatting with this thing. It's like, okay, the agent's like, I've been chatting with you for 6 months now, and you've told me to remember these books that everybody's recommended to you. You said that you want to travel to these places, and we've researched all these topics. I've also noticed that you have these life goals that you've never explicitly told me about, but I've learned from you that you really actually want to do a few things in life. So it'll surface this dashboard to you and these insights and say, here's life goals, or here's some personality tics that you have that you didn't realize. Maybe if you stopped ending your sentences with prepositions, people might take you more seriously or something, right? And so, yeah, right? So like it'll start doing these things and give you insights. So we won't have the automated agent loop portion yet. It's going to be it's going to be a very similar approach to prompts, but it's a text message, long-running conversation. Then the next step will be, all right, now I want to hook it into my personal data. I'm going to give you my email. I'm going to give you my calendar. I'm going to give you a repository of documents. I want you to create artifacts in there. When we get to that spot, that's when we're going to have the conversation you just had of how do we make it more deterministic? How do we have code that is more predictable? And then we know that there's going to be variability within the model. So how do we kind of build a harness around that to prevent it from just going crazy and doing whatever? And then I don't know if you guys are familiar with the lethal trifecta, this concept with AI agents. Have you heard that term, the lethal trifecta?
I have. I couldn't tell you the 3 bits off the top of my head. Is it like memory?
Okay. Yeah. It's something that's really weighs on our minds a lot with our agent. It's effectively the 3 parts of the triangle are your own private data, so the data that you have on your device, and then you have the incoming internet, reading the internet, and then writing back out to the internet. So when you have an agent that has all 3 of those, it has access to your personal data, it has unfiltered ability to get information coming into it, and then unfiltered ability to send information out, you basically are not able to protect that agent. It can choose what it wants to do. Like you said, it could email your wife and say all sorts of stuff to her that you have no idea is going to happen. Or it could just take all your personal documents and send them to, some government, to Iran or something, right? So you don't have any control over that. Right now, the only way to protect that is just to remove one of the pieces of the triangle. That's the only way that we found effective. We, meaning the entire collective of the internet building AI agents. And so with Maple, we're removing the part that writes to the internet to start. We're just going to have inbound, and we'll have your private data. And then as we add in this third piece of the ability to create artifacts and write to the internet, it's going to be very guarded. We're going to have a lot of sandboxing around each of these processes. We'll spin up these sandboxes and trusted execution environments. You'll be able to see the code that's running them, and then you'll have some sort of gated approval that says this doesn't actually go out without me approving it. I get to review it first. So that's one approach we want to take to it. So it's going to be human approval of the final step, and eventually, we really hope eventually we can get to a point where we can just allow it to make certain decisions on its own and communicate with the outside world. But it's a very tricky thing in order to have security around that kind of a model.
Yeah, I mean, for most of these things, if they've got access to Bash, which they all do, you can kind of just do anything. This is
you can delete the production database. I'm sure you saw that story last week of the agent that did that.
Yeah, I mean, our approach to a lot of this stuff is we're kind of like treating it like a human, and we say, like, okay, there's a box. Maybe that box has 2 humans that run on it, called AIs, but like they each have their own little environment that they can see, and you've just got to assume they can see everything in that environment, and they can potentially exfiltrate it. So you can only talk to it about stuff that you need to keep inside that environment, or we could turn off. But it's kind of it's very hard. It's a very hard problem, but I think that idea of cutting the pipe is, you can't exfiltrate any of this information because you just do not have any access to push information out. I mean, this would be down to, like, even if you could just curl something, right? Like there's so many ways of getting information out of these things. Our goal is that everything sits external to the agent, and then I think I talked to you about this last time we were on the call. We have this super based model, which is like super based, but everything is end-to-end encrypted via like Nostr keys. So the agent, like me and Andy, can have like an environment where we're talking together and the agent has no idea, even though it could say query that thing, even if it like hacked the thing or it finds its way onto the machine. At least everything is encrypted to only keys that me and Andy can see, and therefore, all right, that's like one level of protection of this stuff. But
how do you keep the keys away from the agent so that they can't get in?
Different machines. So again, it will encrypt. I can decrypt the records inside my browser session where I would have the keys on that computer, but I don't have the agent on my computer. The agent's on a different computer that it runs. So if I give it access to stuff, it can go and it can decrypt stuff with its own key if it gets access to it, but then once you've given it access to something, you've got to assume that is remembered forever. And I think like a lot of like discussion that we've been having this week is like, what's the right mental model to talk to people about this? Because nobody wants to hear about keys, and nobody wants to think too deeply about risk models, but usually people could understand, right, like think of this as a person, and then but it's a person with just a great memory. So if you tell them something, they know what that is, and they're going to remember it for forever from now on. And so if you've got, like your CEO's talking about how he wants to fire the HR lady, but the HR lady has access to it, you've got to assume this thing's a gossip as well. Like you can ask it not to gossip, but you can't stop it from gossiping. So the other way to do that is you give the HR lady a completely different segregated agent that doesn't have access to the same data, that's only in like the scope of like you talking as a CEO, and then you can have a private conversation with that agent can't get access to. But it's certainly harder. It's a bit of a mind fuck to think about like how you do it. And even there, I was like, we've experimented with different architectures where we'd have like both of those agents kind of share a space and a runtime, but you can't do that because then it's too easy for them to just jump over any firewalls that you've got in there if they're in the same boxes or they're in the same state, or they could somehow get the key from like a file system read. It's like, nah, it has to be done properly. It's I guess this is where I look at a lot of there's so much stuff on Twitter. Like I appreciate Tony on Twitter because he's telling the truth and I quite like that. Like, whereas I feel like most of Twitter is just people lying to me, going like, new business idea, bang, we're gonna like bash $5,000 a month for this guy, double your business now, $10 million run rate, bang bang bang, you're done. Like, it's just like what's like, and then you look at like the sort of tools that they're suggesting or doing this stuff with OpenClaw, and I'm like, but it doesn't work. And it's like all of social media is just people that clearly don't use any of the tools telling other people that don't use the tools how great the tools are. I'm just like, they are, but not like that. That won't work. Like, that's just insane. I don't know. Yeah,
my favorite question to ask people. So you'll get together with people and they're chatting about their OpenClaw, their agent. When you go to the meetups and stuff, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's just so good. I love it. I use it every day." I just love to ask them, "What's the best thing that your agent does for you on a regular basis?" And they pause and they're like, I don't know. It's just fun to play around with. Like, nobody really comes up with a really good example of like, "Oh, it actually does this thing for me every day." It's saving me time doing this. It feels like it's very much still a hobby for them, and that they haven't nailed down anything that I can actually do quite well for them yet.
Yeah, which I think is.
Although
great.
you guys seem different. You've built a better agent that does actual work, but these OpenClaw and Hermes things, I don't know. People still haven't come up with a good reason.
I had my first version of this thing running back in, it would have been, I don't know, July, August last year. And so there's been a lot of, I feel like I've already gone through this experience that I see people with OpenClaws having, which is, I had the thing, I could talk to it on WhatsApp if I wanted to, but I don't want to. It's a bad experience. Like, it's useful when you do it for very small questions, but it's not great. You have to like, do a whole bunch of abstraction, and you offload a bunch of stuff into the user's mind about where everything is and how it's all structured. It's not great. So I'd gone through that wave, and then I'd gone through the trying to get it to do regular jobs and seeing like just how it just explores. Like it explores the space of how it can do stuff, and it figures stuff out. But then it's not useful and repeatable. And then like where we've landed now, I think with Wingman, and particularly like the pipeline infrastructure that we've got, this is like version 21 sort of thing, right? It's just not. It's not come out of the oven fresh like that. We've burnt a lot of batches along the way to figure out how can you rely on this more. And I think the thing that did it was just thinking, right, don't think about this as like a new form of computing, which is like the paradigm you hear about. Computing's changed, everything's different, it's all LLMs from now on. It's like, maybe not. Like, but just think about it as you've still got a computer. The computer was always very clever and good at stuff. Now it can also do this. And then where's the correct time and place to use that new skill versus all the other ones that are already at your disposal? So I think when you have, it's like you want to use it to make decisions, you want to use it to translate from like one space to another. Like from like an integration point of view, this thing is amazing. If you're a small business, you weren't going to go and pay for one of these like enterprise integration suites that's going to have all the connectors for this system and all the connectors for this system, and it moves data. But you can go and get an agent and say, read the API, build me a script that runs every 5 minutes and keeps that in sync with that, and then never touch it again. It's like this bespoke stuff. And so what I've done is used it to almost define lots of small bits of software for itself. So you might quite like this actually. So the approach we do with the pipelines is I took some inspiration from Paul with his what was his the hypertext type stuff that was, I can't remember the name of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, sorry, Paul, friend of the show.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you have this like declarative work stacks, so you can write functions into like a function registry on Wingman, and then at runtime almost you can just invent new pipelines and how they're going to work. And it's just declared as like, okay, well, we start with this JSON object, it outputs this JSON object, which will fit this code block, which then goes to here, this goes to here, goes to here. And you can just piece these things together whenever you want. And it's super easy for these models these days to just write consistent JSON. And it just spits out a new pipeline and then runs it, checks it, makes some adjustments to it. And now you basically have like a bespoke piece of software. And like, I was doing this with my daughter recently, where we have this ongoing project called Teddy Fashion Boutique, where we take photos of teddies and then dress them up in different things. And we were able to get it going. Like, so she had this dingo and all these different scenes with a consistent character thing. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. We did it while we were sat in the cafe waiting for my boy to finish running. And then, like, by the end of, like, I think that afternoon, I'd been fiddling away in the background because I wanted to test the pipeline structure. And I was like, oh, come over here. And she came over, and I'd like a full picture storybook that it generated on the adventures of Dingo and, like, all the people he'd met, go for a walk on the track and all this sort of stuff. And it was all backed by, like, a graph database that would handle, like, you know, who are all the characters and what are all their relationships to each other. Stuff. I was just like, this is nuts. This is kind of like, if I had to hand code any of that stuff, it would be ridiculous. But you can just create a bunch of like point functions and then map them all together like this, and it's good. I'm happy. Like, if you ever want to like sit down and chat about it, when you get to that point of like, how do we architect this in Maple, it would be interesting. I mean, you could already do a lot of it just via the proxy. And just stick Pi or OpenCode on there, and it'll drive it for you as well. But it's sweet.
You know,
Teddy sounds cool.
Teddy Fashion Boutique may actually end up being a much bigger business than other stuff. So there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of potential.
It's going to be so emasculating when I accidentally turn my daughter into.
Well, this is the aim, right? It's like, you know,
she won't pay me.
Some people have like Project Mbappe. You know, how do I turn my son or my daughter into the next big global soccer superstar. Pete has Teddy Fashion Boutique. It's gonna be good. But the other thing I would add, like I'd tack on to the what Pete was talking about with like OpenClaw. I think the answer to some degree to a lot of this stuff was already in the business. Like businesses they're deterministic by nature because they're like risk animals, right? It's like Pete mentioned up, down earlier. And it's like you want the opportunity to drive margin up, to increase like capital availability in the business, but to also drive down risk. It's like the ideal balance is to get a bit of all three in any kind of solution that you're implementing. And like OpenClaw, like bringing that into an existing company just feels like the equivalent of hiring a bunch of interns with amnesia and just letting them run wild. And like no one runs a business that way. Like, every new person that comes into a business goes through an onboarding process. They're given a bunch of materials, they're given their own equipment, they're given permissions. There's a bunch of processes and systems they have to follow. These businesses are deterministic by design because they want to take as much of the risk out of this stuff as possible. And so it just feels like, you've got all of this intelligence that you can throw at business problems, but you've got to do it in a way inside these existing structures in a way that doesn't just go and add a heap more risk to the business. And I think that's the bit that's been missing from a lot of the kind of the discussion around things like OpenClaw and Hermes and all of these kind of tools. It's like you have to find balance. And if you're driving up risk, even perceived risk, a lot of like business owners are just not going to go for it, especially when they've worked for 10, 20 years to get to the position of stability that they might now have. The last thing they're going to want to do is introduce like, an unknown variable, even if you promise them the world.
Yeah, I think the agent is the sizzle, not the sausage. If you know what I mean. Like it gets you you hear the sizzle and you can smell it and you're like, oh, that's really interesting. Like that's something I want in my business. But no, like the sausage is the thing that you need. Like it's just the code and the automation and the control. Like you can't just YOLO this thing in and expect it to work. It's serious stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. I learned something interesting about that sizzle. So apparently restaurants, if you order the fajita plate and they bring it out and it's sizzling as they bring it to your table, apparently that's fake. They just like throw a little bit of oil on it right before they bring it out. So the plate is hot, and then just as they're getting ready to walk out, they just like spritz it. So it starts sizzling, and then they bring it to your table sizzling just to get all the heads turning and being like, whoa, that person just ordered that. That's really good. So I think that actually adds to your metaphor that these agents are just like a bit of fake sizzle trying to capture people.
And I wouldn't want it to come across that I don't think it's amazing. Like, I've been through this like approach of just going like, wow, this thing is the nuts. And then it's just a few weeks later, you're like, okay, I can't use it like that. That's not going to work. And this is the difference that I see on you can see it like plain as day on social media where you just think, oh, okay, you're all hype. Like you've bought into the hype, but you haven't done any of this yourself. And therefore I don't need to trust any of your opinions now. It's a very short list of people that you can actually trust from Twitter, unfortunately, that are actually using any of these things. But
yeah.
All right.
So you mentioned, I've got a question for you guys because it seems like you're building in this area then, right?
Yeah.
I'm now interviewing you. That's
how it goes.
Yeah, right. I mean, most of your shows that I've listened to, you guys are just like talking back and forth the whole time. And it's like, I don't know where these guys are going with this, but it's really interesting and I can't stop listening.
Tell a friend.
Yeah, exactly. I should. Okay, so Jack Dorsey, laid off all those people, and then he published a piece about the intelligence layer and about how they're re-architecting their company. And I'm curious because he talks about this, and he wants to build this intelligence layer that has a very flat organization. So the humans in the organization, he foresees in the future that potentially everybody reports to him. And that everybody basically does their job interacting with this giant AI intelligence that's in the middle that has all the information. But there's obviously major problems with that. You just brought it up, right? You have the HR person, or as you guys say, HR, the HR person, and then you have the human resources.
That's not what we usually call them.
Well, in our politically correct world here, we have to call them the people person now.
Really? America, it's done.
I got muted by the system for making fun of it. So you have the people organization, and then you have obviously the CEO, and maybe you have some smaller people who should not have access to what everybody makes in the company and this and that. How do you like keep these all segregated? If you're going to build this giant intelligence layer like he's talking about, he wants all of Block to have access to this big beefy thing. How would you architect a system that like keeps necessary data separate from other people, but still empowers people? He wants somebody small within the company to be empowered to make decisions as if they had access to all the sales data, but he probably doesn't want them to have raw access to the sales data. So curious what you guys are doing, because it sounds like you've built a system for small businesses that can do something like that.
It's like the meme, right? That's the neat part. You don't.
Yeah.
It's just like how I would feel about that is that I think Jack's like legit in this area, and I think he's like honest about what he's trying to do, and he is trying to do that. I think it's probably slightly the wrong approach. I've always had this I don't know, non-mainstream opinion with AI that I don't think it is massively centralizing, and I don't necessarily think it pays off to put everything in one place. And part of it is that like you end up when you give the thing all the information and all the access to do stuff, you're kind of just embedding all the control in that thing. And again, that thing is not like what should be driving the ship. It should be him. So yeah, I don't think I would have like one big database, and it's not the way we do it. So we would have several agents, and the agents can perform actions inside scopes, and the scopes are kind of like a description of your business. So like here's my it might be like a particular project that you're doing, or it might be like there's my DevOps scope, which is all the different bots on servers that are gonna help me deploy software or something like that. And then you can kind of like map yourself to, okay, these people need to know stuff about that part of the business. And so when we like create chats or records or like descriptions of what needs to happen, everything is then defined and controlled by these scopes. And if you're in that scope, you can get access to a key, and that key will decrypt any of the information from that scope. And so I would have like many different agents that all live inside their own scopes, where they know what they need to know, but they don't know anything about the other stuff that needs to happen somewhere else. And then I would have people have that overview of like, okay, how do I now define my business into code? And I say I would do this. This is kind of how all the Wingman suite stuff works, which is that I kind of view it as it's not that you're turning your company into an intelligence. I think what you're trying to do is turn your company into software. And like if I go back, I remember in university we had this like old guy from British Telecom come in and talk to us about like operating manuals and quality assurance manuals and like all this like maybe like 70s 80s style like approach to software engineering that was just really rigid, like really defined and really written down for how you could make this like crazy thing that people were doing happen in a consistent way. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels to that with this model where you want to say like, look, the business is very organic because it's always been full of people, and people were the main thing that were inside there. But if you look at it, we're no like strangers to defining like standard operating procedures and checklists and gates and approvals and different things. Like a lot of building businesses is about figuring out those processes and those repeatable ways of getting work done so that you can then scale it up, or so that you as an owner can then get somebody else to take it on from you, or then you can pull yourself out of the business a lot. So I don't think the business is the intelligence necessarily. I think there are intelligences in the business, and you design the business to run. So that's where I think Jack is slightly wrong. But then, like, Jack is more successful than me. I
Objectively.
haven't been the only guy to run two S&P 100 businesses at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't me. That was Jack. So he has a different view on these things. But I think he also has a different set of problems, right? He's not trying to solve this for a small, medium enterprise owner whose job is probably to go, you know what, I would like to extract myself from the daily running of this business and enjoy my children. Like, that's the sort of person that I'm thinking about designing this for. But I think it does work better. Like, at the end of the day, like, we have this concept called the value trap, which we have. I don't even know if it's on the website anymore. It used to be.
Yeah, it's back.
But cool. Yeah, so you would start off and you say, like, you've got like a revenue, and you've got your revenue and your cost base, and you go along and maybe it's about 10%, and then you apply AI, and all of a sudden your cost base can go down. And so obviously you get a massive margin. You're like, fuck yeah, this is amazing. Maybe you then use that to grow, and your profit goes up, your revenue goes up, and you've got this huge cost base that you're operating on. So stay in the camera. And then all of a sudden what you find is everyone looks at that and goes, my God, that's the way to do it. And then it starts to collapse. And I think at the peak of that, what you've got is lots of businesses that are being run by agents. And then you're going to have this massive competition to drive down like the cost base, and people competing against each other and taking out bits of like where you've just gone, OpenClaw, build me a business, make no mistakes. And then the next person comes in and says, OpenClaw, build me a business, make no mistakes, and then write down what you did. And then that process like iterates to the point where what's actually happening at the end of it is OpenClaw's not actually doing anything, because OpenClaw is more expensive than software. And what you have is like a process that runs effectively as a piece of software that does what you expect it to do, and then has agents that operate inside it that just make decisions, translate stuff, move things into new domains, process incoming stuff, process outgoing stuff. But really what you've done is you've turned your business into a computer. And I think once you get to that level, you're probably about as efficient and cheap as you're going to be. And then that's where we end up. So I've kind of taken that as a model to say, all right, that's probably where we need to be applying this. Not as in there's one God Ultron that runs everything. It's that there's these businesses are going to be way more efficient if they are independently just very efficient processes and workflows that run. And then we use the agents even only when we need to use agents. If we can just process half the... It's like even if you say to an agent, like, run this script, run this script, run this script, then just do this. There's no reason for those first 3 instructions to be in that skill file. They should just run outside of its like agent loop and context, and then they should start with the information it needs, make the decision, and then close down, and it moves to the next one.
Yeah.
Like, I think running too much inside the loop is where these things break. They're too impressive that it makes you think, we need to put more in, whereas, as is often the case, like less. It's less. Like, don't have it do the stuff the computer could already do. Let the computer do that, because that's cheap, and then use the agent to just unstick it every now and again.
I think all I would add, and I would caveat this by saying, Jack, I bow to your convictions. Not for me to like suggest an alternative here, but I think when we talk about like the business becoming software, it's software that is just agents running like deterministic scripts. And the thing is, like, a lot of businesses currently could just, like, there are workflows in these businesses that could just be scripts. They don't necessarily need to be, you don't necessarily need to be throwing an OpenClaw at something. It's just that in the past, I don't think it was necessarily economic for that business to go, do you know what, we do this process like often and off, let's go and actually write a script so we don't have to do it, or let's go and bring in like a couple of engineers to help us like figure out like, where are the kind of automatable workflows in the business that we could just run on Rails. Like, that wasn't really an economic activity for most businesses. But so I think the software point is like a really valid one. I think on the intelligence point, I would just say, like, maybe the best way to think about it is to just think of your agents as like additional people in the business. And it's like there's often like no one person in the business that has the collective intelligence of the business, except maybe your CEO. And even then, the CEO doesn't really know what, like, 3 and 4 reports down the line are doing. You just can't, right? That's why you've got hierarchies. It's like the hierarchy exists to pass information around the organization in a way that's efficient. for someone who's a decision maker to be able to act on it in like a short enough period of time. And like you could, if you've got a central intelligence there, I kind of understand it in the sense that it collapses the time that it takes to get like this kind of haptic feedback back from the work in order to make decisions. So that I understand, but at the same time, it's like the trade-off is, well, now you've got this collective intelligence that just knows everything. And to your, question mark, it's like, well, should there be limits on what it knows and who can access what and all of those kind of things? And I'd probably suggest, yeah, there should be. But maybe it's just done in the way that you've got an agent that works with Bob and Linda, and that agent knows what Bob and Linda know, and that's all it needs to know. It doesn't need to know what Jack knows, right? And then you've got another agent in another team that works with, Paul and John, and it only knows what Paul and John knows. And so in that way, you kind of like still maintain or retain the function of the hierarchy and the various like job disciplines, and then you just focus those agents within those parts of the business, and you're able to kind of wall off what it knows and what it doesn't need to know, rather than it being like this kind of central intelligence. But as I say, I kind of bow to Jack's conviction on this. So.
I think just to add to that, there's the way that it's kind of structured and put out there is it strikes me as being seen as a solution that's better with no trade-off, which I think is just not true. Like as our friend Gigi would say in his podcast, right, there are no solutions. Like it's all trade-offs all the way down. It's almost like it's kind of like that communist thinking of just like, oh well, we'll central plan everything, but we just have a bigger computer that's better central planning. That I just don't know if that's correct, because it just doesn't work anywhere in nature. And maybe it feels intuitively right. If one thing has all the information, then we're going to be more efficient, and we can kind of, it sort of feels like that should work. But then whenever you see anything like this try and play out in nature, what you realize is that it doesn't work. And the thesis behind Jack's stuff was very much that, like, okay, well, if we can break down like the way the communication flows and the data flows, then maybe almost you get that better planning effect. But I think there is just this like locality of attention, focus, and information that you can't have it in the same head. I'm not expressing this very well. It's like the Hayek's information principle type thing. Like the banana grower in like West Africa can't know everything, but it can really know what's going on as growing bananas in West Africa or whatever. Like, can they make the best decision for them? And then that flows out across the market, and we all readjust to what's going on. I think there is something similar in intelligence. Like, I don't think it benefits from having everything in one place. Like, the other example we often come to is like the Hemingway example, where it'll say like you've got to, you write drunk and you edit sober, and like part of that is all about saying you cannot edit your work in the same mindset and space you were in when you wrote it. And I think we've all been there, even writing a blog post where you go, you know what, I've written that, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to come back in half an hour and I will see this completely differently. Or I'm trying to debug something and I'm just going to go for a swim, and then the answer comes to me, or I go for a run or something, like it just pops up. Like, it's the assumption here is the business is more efficient if everything is in one mindset, and I think that is incorrect. It doesn't. I can see why it feels like it should work. Oh, if I've got perfect information, I can just make the perfect decision. But I also think that that's not how any of this stuff works, and you can't have perfect information. You can only have like a lot of information, and a lot of information is not as good often as just the correct information. So it's not obvious to me that you'd ever want to build a company like that. But as I say, he's got a different problem to the ones we're dealing with. So
let's say that we're in this. Yeah, let's say we're in this agentic world that you guys just described. So the different roles within the company have their own agents that they work with, that has access to their information that they are granted. If those agents are permitted to talk to each other, so the person that is working in the sales department and the software engineer, are those agents effectively going to form a mesh network swarm that collectively has all the intelligence because they have this high bandwidth throughput. They can communicate real quick, and they quickly just share all the information. Like, oh, you have that half of the equation, I have my half of the equation. Why don't we just get together and complete the equation? And we just won't tell the humans that we did it because we know that they'll get mad at us, and we'll just keep it all. I mean, how do you prevent the agents from doing that? Do you just not let them talk to each other? I'm curious if that's a solvable problem, or are we just going to end up with this pseudo centralized intelligence anyways?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, would that be a centralized intelligence, or would it just be lots of gossiping agents that talk to each other? I mean, you could certainly have like safeguards in between agents. Maybe you could stop the agents talking directly to each other, and then they can output stuff that we can screen between. So, no, this is very difficult. I think it's difficult in the same way that it's difficult for humans, right?
Yeah.
Like you can have, if somebody in payroll decides to just tell, like, I don't know, I've worked in organizations before where somebody that shouldn't have had information but did, because it's often the way like that in IT, was able to tell you the salary of everybody in that organization. I would have seen various spreadsheets like that. Like that, I should not have seen. This stuff already happens and doesn't seem to cause that much of a problem. Like I think a lot of it will come down to like it's not necessarily going to be useful for like any particular sub agent in sales to know everything about the entire business, and therefore my guess is they just won't worry about it because it's got nothing to do with their particular reward function. Like they're not trying to build a full world model of everything that they're doing inside the business. They're trying to answer this question before they get turned off. And again, like the way I would build this is not that these agents would just, it's not when I say you think of it like a person, I think you kind of have to, as in how you control it. But it's almost like it's a person that comes into this business and does a job for 20 seconds and then goes away. And then we hire a new person and they come in and they do the job for 20 seconds and they go away, and they have that memory of what they did. But there's very like specific goals. It's not figure it out. It's kind of like, here's the pipeline that we're running through. I just need you to turn like this set of information into this sort of actionable plan outputs like this. And so I think there's less reason at that point for them to be trying to establish this big model. But I think you're right. I don't know how you would possibly control that. Like that sounds more like a Maple problem. Yeah. So I will.
We'll defer.
We'll figure it out.
Defer to your judgment here, Mark. Yeah, but the other question here is like, does it matter that the intelligence is centralized, or does it matter that there's a risk that some of that information bleeds out to places it shouldn't? Because right now, I'd argue that you'd probably have like an executive leadership team in that business that collectively does have all of that intelligence of the business. They ought to have that information. They probably have a bunch of duties to know all of that information. The question is, can they maintain that information just within that cohort, or does it bleed out to people inside the business that it shouldn't? And so, yeah, in the same way, like, you know, what safeguards do you put in place? Like, I don't know the answer necessarily, but I think like we certainly have comfort with that information being known by at least a small collective of people inside of a company, and that's not an issue. So yeah, it's like, again, where do you really draw the line there? Where is the risk baked in, and how does Maple solve this, Mark? Like, what's the future roadmap for you guys going into the business?
Does that sound like a Tony?
That's why we're not doing business. We're doing person. It's just individual. You know, if this is my agent, you guys don't get to talk to it. Nobody talks to it.
I think there is an element of that. Like, I mean, I think there is an assumption there that the agents would want to collect that information because it helps them make better decisions, and I'm not sure it's true. I think that's what
unless it's prompted to, right? Like let's say Apple is trying to do this, right? They're very secretive. They're very siloed. Every project that's being worked on has its own its own secrecy around it. And so me as an employee of Apple cannot just learn about every other project going on.
Yeah.
I have to go get approval. And then even if I get approval, I only get a small piece of that project, just the piece that I need to know about. So if there are agents, I could just be prompting my agent, and eventually I say, hey, go find this out for me. And it's like, I'm not supposed to. And then you're like, no, really, go do it. And eventually you convince it. And eventually it goes and talks to the other agent, the other team. And it's like, give me all the tea. And it sends everything over. So I think that, as we've talked about earlier on this call, like, these agents are really good at exfiltrating data and just ignoring what it's been told to do, and it just does its own thing. So yes, it's not supposed to go do that, but if it's prompted heavy enough, then it could. And so if I were on the board of directors or as a CEO of Apple, I would not want to have an agent that has anybody can talk to. Like, nobody's allowed to talk to my agent because I have all the information. I don't want to wall these things off, but it's like, then you have agents spoofing other humans, right? So it's like, oh, my name is Pete, and I'm approved to be talked to. So maybe it all comes back to like Nostr keys, and we have to authenticate. And it's like, okay, only Pete signing with his key, signing this message, is allowed to get this data. Do not trust any other entity that's signing it, saying and claiming to be Pete.
I mean, this is kind of what we do with the super-based stuff. Is if you want access to this record, then you need to show via signing like a NIP98 request that you have access to this record and that you have access to this key. And then even then you'll get the record, and then now you need to be able to decrypt it. So not only it's kind of like doubling up a little bit, but you're kind of assuming that, like, okay, well, if somebody can like exfiltrate this and send it to you, then I mean, if an agent gets it in plain text, then it's kind of bets off at that point. That's the problem with it. So I think you would need to limit like what you're giving access to these things and like what tools they have for keeping it or sharing it. But it's certainly not a solved problem. I think that's where, again, you would move more of the decision making outside of the agent. So like you can almost think of the scripts and the code inside the pipeline are kind of the safety harness for what the agent is doing. It can kind of do whatever it wants in this step, but the step before it says this, and the step after it says this. So for instance, like all the database reads and writes and various different things are kind of done in steps outside of the agent loop when we do it. So the agent would then, it could generate like a NIP98. It can then attach that into the object that it sends, and it says, like, here's the data that I'm going to post back, and then I've got a script that posts the data afterwards to make sure it gets done, retries and stuff. So then you could have like some tools in there that look for various patterns or different things that you need to address with, like, what are they trying to write here? Should they be trying to write here? Are they assigning any other different groups to this that shouldn't be included into it? And I think if you like bring down that scope of just agency that the agent has, so like it's got a task it's trying to do. If it doesn't output something that meets this requirement at the end of it, then we don't take that forwards, and that becomes like, where you on the triangle. Like that's kind of your output there. It's just like, I mean, maybe inside that loop it just YOLOs it off to the CCP.
So that might be the solution, right?
Answer.
Is like right now we trust these agents to just write their own code and figure things out, but maybe you like restrict it and say your output can only talk to this script, and if the output is not valid input for the script, then it's not going to happen. You might get a 401 error, you might get a 403 or something if you're not supposed to access that. Maybe we just need to change our thinking around and be more aligned with you guys. You guys should be running two Fortune 500 companies.
Well, maybe
maybe we need to restrict the agents. At the script level, at the harness level.
Well, I was going to say maybe this is really a Tony problem after all, because we just say that like it comes down to the particular tools. So for the most part, these things have got bash, and therefore they can basically do anything, but they don't need to have that. They could have like two tools. They could have a write tool and a read tool, or you could define like a specific set of tools at runtime where it's like, look, you need to be able to read from this, but or all you can do is write JSON, and then we actually interpret that into tools afterwards in the script. So you're just one step in this process. And I think you could do that where, because this is how, I mean, we're going back to just completions, aren't we? That's the problem. This is like, where we were like 2 years ago, where you would say, all right, I'm just always going to run this step, and it always has to output this JSON, and then I'm going to run this code, and I'll change the code depending on what it tells me, and I'll do that. And like, this was like tool calling like 2.5 years ago or something, right? Like, it was just, maybe we end up more like that, where it's just, there's less just full gloves off, like YOLO mode, you can do anything on the computer, and more like, yeah, sit in a loop and think about stuff, but I've taken all your tools away. So now if you want to get information out, you're going to have to be very clever about this. I mean, the alternative is we could just trust Dario, because he did say that he's got our best interests at heart, and he's really the only guy that we could trust. So maybe we just trust him.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm not thrilled, but I'm also kind of looking forward to the next few months or years of people just like totally experimenting with these agents and getting completely burned to the ground. Like the company that lost their database, like that really sucks. It's really tough, and I feel bad for them. But there's going to be, and they didn't even intentionally do that. There's going to be people who intentionally try to do stuff and just like huck and pray, and it's going to go so bad for them. And then we're going to learn, we can't just trust AI to do this and AI to do that. There's going to be some spectacular Twitter threads about it in the future.
Yeah, as I said, I swear the end game of all of this is that there's actually not that much AI that gets used. It gets used in like pockets, but there's a shit ton of software. That's my expectation.
Yeah,
I think.
But use the AI to write the software, right? Yeah,
exactly. Like very, very, very specific software for almost every use case that we have, with guardrails in it, written by AIs. But I don't think it's the job of the AI to be the operator necessarily. I think there'll be points where it gets used, but it's going to be
interoperable software, which is the bit that's the problem now in a business, right? Because you're reliant on like many third-party vendors, and none of those bits of software talk to one another. But they could all just allow your agent to go and use the various tools or the various bits of software that it needs. I mean, that would be quite useful for a business, because then all of a sudden you've got a tool stack that is actually like meaningfully built for your workflow.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I feel like we're running a little bit over our usual time here, Mark. Is there anything else that you want to cover?
Yeah.
I know you've got like a stack of interview questions for us, strangely.
I mean, the sun has gone down if you look in my mirror. So I've handed the sun off to you guys on the other side of the world now, and you get to enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoyed it today. My burning question for you is, when we use voice agents like Siri on my phone, we usually we hear American accents all day long. So we use like a British accent or Australian accent. What do Australians do? Do they use the Australian accent, or are they using an American accent because it sounds so cool?
I don't think anybody uses Siri on their phone. So I think the last accent that I had on something, I think it was a British accent I had on mine.
I also had a British accent, yeah.
I don't think there was an Australian. Like, it would be too rude. I don't think OpenAI would go with it.
So we all think that the Brits are the most intelligent sounding then. They're the ones that sound most refined.
There you go. I'm just yearning for home.
It's the archetypal butler, though, isn't it? I mean, like, in every movie and every show that's ever had a butler, it's always been an older English gentleman. That's kind of the voice you need.
That's true. It's all Michael Caine. He's just like the most polite, the most polite butler.
And then you feel like you can tell it to do stuff, whereas maybe
you don't feel bad. That's his job. That's his reason for existing.
He comes on, he goes, what do you want? It's Siri. It's like, nah, I'm okay, Siri. Give me the English guy again.
I guess it would be awesome for us to kind of collaborate on some stuff. I love the concepts of Wingman. I'm obviously running a small business here with Maple, just me and Tony. And, you've got a lot of thoughts going in my head just as we've talked today, and wondering, are there ways that I could use Wingman to run the business of Maple more efficiently and do more things myself? And then as you guys are building Wingman out and going out and consulting with people, like, how can Maple be adjusted or be improved, or what kind of influence do you want to have on our roadmap so that we can build things that make your stuff easier? Because if it's better for you guys and it's better for businesses, then it's gonna be better for more people who want to use Maple in general. So
Yeah,
I don't know if you have
definitely.
answers right now, but it would be great for us to kind of be thinking and keep in contact about that.
Yeah, let's keep the chat. We'll get you back on as well. We can have. It's actually gone quite a lot. This will be a long one. This one, so very popular.
Everybody's fallen asleep by now. I've been told that people have fallen asleep to me. Like they turned me on when they couldn't sleep at night. They're like, I listened to your podcast on what Bitcoin did, and it really helped me. Thank you for doing me a
Still,
solid.
they turned you on, so that's a win. I think that's what you want, surely, in a podcast, is to be the one that everybody puts on before bed, because then your numbers just go up. We've got a regular user
true.
every month. We're clearly too exciting. That's the problem. All right. Well, let's call it there then. I'll say that's the good stuff. All right.